Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to the US once again and we're going to return to a state that hasn't featured on the channel all that much, and we're having a look at a beer from another brewery that has never featured on the channel before. Now, this brewery is another interesting find of mine from Kiosk over in Copenhagen, who always have a very good selection of American things, but the brewery itself has been quite prolific over its short history. They do a variety of different styles. There was a bunch of really interesting lagers there when I had a look. They've done a lot of IPAs, and they've also got a number of kind of stronger, more malty and barrel-aged beers as well. So this is a brewery I do look forward to having a look at again at some point in the future. But the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I have had many of on the channel before. It's a style that these guys seem to be quite highly rated in as well, and yeah, it is one that just kind of caught my eye because I like the name of it. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review. And as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to a little place called Lakewood in New Jersey, which is just a little bit to the north of Toms River, about halfway down the eastern coast of the state. And we're going to have a look at my first beer from Icarus Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Drinking Crayons. It comes in at 7.9% ABV, and this one is another New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, like I said, I bought this beer over at Kiosk in Copenhagen, a very good beer shop next to the Sjödbyen area, which is good for its craft beer and its restaurants and things like that. And yeah, like I say, this just caught my eye because of the name, and in fact it was a New Jersey brewery as well, so I'm hoping to go there later in the year in September to see my good friend Dave get married, so you probably will see a few more New Jersey beer reviews on the channel at some stage this year, as well as some out and about videos. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it has in store for us. My very first look at Icarus Brewing Company from Lakewood in New Jersey. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my future reviews that hopefully I can do from Icarus Brewing Company. Very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on the geography tagging system. Just go up to the search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like in there. If I've reviewed beers from your local area, they should pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the American playlist along with many other things, and that playlist is being added to quite regularly, of course, because we're getting more and more beers from the US, from different states as well, which is always interesting to see. So yeah, that list will be getting added to, and there's playlists from many other countries as well. But let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit about Icarus Brewing Company then. So, Icarus Brewing Company, as I've mentioned to you, are based in Lakewood in New Jersey, just a little bit to the north of Toms River, about halfway down the east coast of the state. But the company was founded back in 2015 by Jason Goldstein. So Jason originally studied food science in Ohio, but he later went on to study brewing at Brew Lab in Sunderland in the northeast of England. But after working on the bottling line and having cleaning duties in a brewery, he started to watch the brewers, and then he started home brewing for himself. But following this, he went on to work for several breweries, including Mordew, who are from North Shields, just outside of Newcastle, Darwin Brewery as well, who are from Sunderland, and then he returned to the US to work as the head brewer at Rindon Brewing in Toms River in New Jersey, very close to where they are now. But then he also worked as the lead distiller at Van Brunt Stillhouse in Brooklyn up in New York. But in 2015, he founded Icarus Brewing officially, and they went on to open their doors to the public in November of 2016. They started off with a 10 US barrel brewing system. For those of you unfamiliar with the US barrel, that is about 160 litres, so their brew kit is about 1600 litres for those of us who like the metric system, which is most of the world. We don't use freedom units in other places, but they had a few tanks initially, and over the years they've gradually expanded their fermentation capacity. They've also started experimenting with barrel aging as well, and these days they've got an on-site tap room at the brewery which has 24 different taps, and they've also got a beer garden that opens up during the summer months. They seem to be open quite a few days a week. I think it was only Monday they weren't open, if I remember what it said on the website correctly, and if you look at pictures of the tap room from 2017 compared to today. They've expanded the tap room from having just 10 taps to having 24, and they're really quite prolific as well. As of March 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 700 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And like I said earlier on in the video, they've done a bunch of different lagers. You know, they've got things like smoked pilsners in there. They've got a whole bunch of different kinds of IPAs. And then they've got like doppelbocks, barley wines, and all of this kind of stuff too. So a very experimental brewery. And that's one of the things it seems that Jason quite likes, to kind of stick to the home brewing idea of trying things. They've got a little pilot kit in the brewery, from what I understand as well, where they take like a little bit of the wort that they brew up and try something different with it, you know, changing one of the yeasts and so on. From what I read in the interviews with Jason, it seems that he quite likes to just experiment with things and change one variable and play about it. So he's quite logical in the way that he experiments with his beers. And he is still involved in the brewing process. He is the head brewer, actually. And they've got another brew team in there as well. But yeah, like I say, that is all I can really tell you about Icarus Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a little look at this beer itself. So I can't remember how much this beer actually cost me. I think it was maybe about 70 Danish kroner, something like that. So that translates to be roughly about 100. About 100 Swedish kroner, something like that. So that's about 10 euros, £9 sterling, maybe about $11 American, something like that. Of course, it is an imported beer. Denmark is quite expensive these days because the currency is strong, so that's one of the reasons for the prices. It's probably a good bit cheaper than that over in the US, of course. But this is a 1 American pint can, so that's 473 millilitres. You can also see that this beer has kind of been brewed in support of the 75th anniversary of Toys for Tots. I don't think that charity is accurate in Europe, but I certainly recognise the name. I think I must have seen a few different breweries doing campaigns for this over in the US. But yeah, it tells you on the side here a little bit about the beer. Heavily wheated and oated northeast style Imperial India Pale Ale hop with Eldorado, Amarillo and Columbus, and then copiously dry hop with Azacca, Amarillo, Columbus and Lupulin Mosaic. A portion of all proceeds from this beer will be donated toward the Marine Toys for Tots Foundation. So yeah, I have to say that is pretty cool actually. But like the name of this one was just kind of what caught my eye. Drinking Crayons. I quite like that. But there you can see the Icarus Brewing Company symbol. A little bit with the rising sun there. But yeah, the hops in this beer are quite interesting too. Eldorado, about 12% alpha acid, if memory serves me correctly. That gives you quite a lot of mango and pineapple from what I remember. Amarillo's about 12% alpha acid, big sort of zesty, oily orangey character from that one. Columbus, mainly used as a bittering hop, about 12 or 13% alpha acid, I think, and that gives you that big kind of spicy floral character. Azacca is an interesting one too. I think that's about 14% alpha acid. It gives you quite a bit of a mandarin-y quality, but also some pineapple in there. And then Mosaic, of course, is one of the most popular hops these days, but it's just the lupulin oil, I guess, that they're using in this one, the lupulin powder. I think, yeah, lupulin oil, if I remember correctly. But that gives you a big kind of tangerine orangey kind of character, about 14% alpha acid. But all the hops in this one are, of course, American. Some of them a bit more old school than others. Amarillo and Columbus are probably the most old school of the hops that they're using in this beer. But like we said, 7.9%, New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. Let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm very, very curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. So like I say, it's always interesting to try beers, you know, new beers from different breweries in the US. And it's, you know, we're getting more and more breweries from different states in the US now. Back in the day, it was always California or Colorado and the odd smattering of things from different places. But now we're getting a lot more variety in the beers, the American beers over here in Europe. So yeah, I have to say, this does look very nice. Now, in terms of the appearance of this one, you can see it's poured pretty much as you would expect of a New England IPA. Before the head disappears though, we can say this one is poured with about a quarter finger of quite a bumpy but perfect white head. You can see the bubbles in this one are really just kind of quite bumpy and almost like kind of soapy, I guess, in a sense you could say. But the colour of this beer Is quite nice too. The head incidentally has just faded away to be a very thin foamy layer, but you've got that ring around the edge of the glass there too. But the colour of this beer, I have to say, is quite attractive. Now, I would describe this one as being kind of akin to a very rich mango juice. I think it's fair to say that one. It's got a little bit of a kind of ambery tint to it, but it's mainly a kind of nice bright yellow. But yeah, I always like comparing the appearance of New England IPAs to the different fruit juices, because that's just what the appearance reminds me of, really. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrelation you do or adjuncts you put in will affect the colour of the beer as well. But yeah, you don't often have to care about those latter 2 variables when it comes to the New England IPAs, or any type of IPA for that matter. But yeah, the other thing I have to say about this one is it's not the soupiest and gloopiest of New England IPAs or hazy IPAs that I've come across. I mean, you can see this one does have a good little bit of opacity to it. It's quite opaque, but the level of haze in these beers usually depends on the oak content, the wheat content, and to a degree the yeast. It doesn't have anything really to do with the alcohol scale. It can vary from brewery to brewery and recipe to recipe, of course, but this certainly isn't one of the soupier and gloopier ones I've come across from the US or worldwide either. But, you know, it just depends. You know, it doesn't really matter. As long as the beer tastes good, who really cares? But not too much in the way of visible carbonation in this one, just 1 or 2 big bubbles at the bottom of the glass, and you can see 1 or 2 making their way up toward the bottom of the head in this one too. But yeah, I don't think we need to say anything else about the appearance of this one. Nothing surprising about it when you consider what style the beer is, but let's have a wee look at the aroma and see what it's all about. Oh yeah, it smells pretty nice, and it's interesting for me this, because the first impression I get of this one is that this is actually quite a wheat heavy New England IPA. And it smells as if it's still in pretty good condition as well, because that's one of the things you always have to be careful with if you're buying IPAs from the US. You've always got to make sure that they are kept cold, of course, when they're brought over, and also that they're in, you know, that the date isn't too far on them, because most of your hoppy character will drop out after a certain amount of time. But yeah, for me, aroma-wise, this one comes across as being quite barley malt heavy, but also quite wheat heavy at the same time. I don't get so much of the oats, but yeah, when it comes to the aroma and things like that, there are a few things, the aroma and the flavour, there are 1 or 2 things that you can note here. So for me, the oats have always been a good indicator of how old your New England IPA is. The creamier they are, the fresher the beer is going to be, the kind of drier they are, the older the beer is going to be. Now, this beer I think is maybe about, it's probably about 2 months old at this point. So not quite as fresh as you're going to get it in New Jersey, but for an American beer, I've had this one maybe a couple of weeks actually in the fridge, maybe about 2-3 weeks, because I didn't quite get around to making the notes for the brewery. So yeah, it would have got over here in pretty good condition. But yeah, you can certainly smell you're getting a little bit of dryness out of the oaty character in this beer. And as I've said too, for me there are 6 different ways a New England IPA can lean, or 6 different elements we should consider when it comes to the flavour and aroma. You can get the sort of yeasty and farmhousey type character out of them. You can also get a rye leaning sort of grainy side of things to them. Those 2 variables are a little bit more prominent in American brewed New England IPAs in my experience, but you also have wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and also a kind of sweet side of things too. And those are common in, you know, all New England IPAs, regardless of where they're brewed. But for me, most European brewed New England IPAs are a little bit more kind of creamy and oaty and sort of wheaty and bitey as well. But yeah, aroma wise for me, this one is quite wheaty leaning, and it's also quite barley malt leaning as well. So yeah, let's just try and break the aroma down a wee bit more and describe how it goes. Yeah, so for me, to say the backbone of this one is quite wheaty, but there's certainly a good little bit of a fresh white bread crust in there. I do like how that goes together. There's a little tiny hint, little teeny tiny hint of a sort of woodiness in there. A little bit of Jacob's cream cracker as well. Yeah, fresh white bread crust, a little bit of woodiness, kind of Jacob's cream cracker. I don't know if that's a good descriptor for Americans watching the video, but it certainly is for Europeans. On top of that, I get a little touch of a kind of wholemeal brown bready character out of this one, but mainly the bready notes you get out of this beer are kind of big white bready characteristics. At the back of the nose, you can smell a little bit of wheaty bitiness as well, but the wheat, of course, the wheat for me is actually quite smoothening in this beer, if that makes sense. It's a more of a smoothening agent rather than giving you a bit of bitiness and zip, so we need to see if that comes out in the flavour as well. But you can certainly feel the wheat or smell the wheat densifying the whole beer. But you've also got, with this beer, you've also got a good little bit of, you've also got a good bit of kind of oaty creamy character coming out of this one as well, which I do really quite like. So the oats, as I said earlier, are giving you a little bit of dryness for sure, which tells you the beer is maybe maybe 2 months old, something like that. So certainly a little bit of that going on, bit of oaty dryness in there. You've also got a little bit of a creamier character, but there's a wee touch of sweetness in this beer as well. So for me, there is a little touch of that kind of butterscotchy, butter candy type thing out of this one. So yeah, that's interesting too. I'm also from the yeast, which I'm guessing is from the yeast, getting a little bit of that. I don't know what a good comparison for Americans would be. I'm getting a little bit of that kind of skittly sort of Pander Violet type candy note out of this one. Some of the yeasts that are used in these New England IPAs can give you a few sort of candy, sugary notes, and you get this almost like Skittles type aroma in there as well. So when you take the aroma quite deeply in your nose in the beer, you can certainly get a little bit of that out of this one. This beer does have a little bit of candied sweetness to it as well. But I think that covers the malty and kind of yeasty side of the beer. Now the green component for me is quite interesting, and straight away with this beer you can tell that it's mainly late addition hopping and dry hopping that's been used in this one. So remember, 3 kinds of hoppings when it comes to IPAs. Early addition hopping within the first hour of the wort boil, that gives you mainly bitterness. Late addition hopping usually within the last half hour of the wort boil, that gives you a little bit of bitterness but mainly flavour and aroma. You've got that trade-off over the course of the wort boil, of course, where bitterness disappears and you get more flavour and aroma out of the hops. And then dry hopping after the wort boil is complete, that is all to do with flavour and aroma. West Coast IPAs always tended to use all 3, which is why you get more bitterness out of them. New England IPAs tend to rely on late and dry hopping. So yeah, you can tell that with this one. What that translates to in the aroma normally is a brighter, more green component in the New England IPAs, whereas with the West Coast IPAs, because of the early addition hopping, you get a more deep, dank and kind of piney type quality out of them. So for me, the green component in this beer, you do have a little touch of earthiness in there and a wee bit of herbal quality. And the earthiness is most likely, I think, to come from the mosaic in this one. All of the hops are going to give you a little bit of grassiness and floral character though. But I don't get so much of the spiciness that you'd normally expect from the Columbus actually, which is interesting. But yeah, for me, there's a little bit of floral character in there, but the green component leans more towards a kind of wet, grassy note. But the fruity character in this beer is lovely, I have to say that. So let's focus on that now. For me, there is a bit of kind of soft mango in this one. And that's going to be the El Dorado, I think, that's going to give you that. There's a wee teeny bit of like passion fruit in there as well. So yeah, passion fruit, mango, a little bit of apricot in there. And I get a lot of orange though, and that's the Amarillo and the Mosaic that are going to give you that. The Azacca will contribute to it as well. So I'm getting a bit of a brighter tangerine, but also a more oily, zesty orange from the Amarillo. And the Azacca is going to give you the kind of brighter, juicy orange as well, the mandarin tangerine notes. So yeah, for me, it's quite an orangey leaning New England IPA, this one. And I think that's another thing that really kind of caught my eye with this was the hop bill, because it had quite a lot of the more orangey leaning hops actually. And I'm a sucker for an orangey IPA, I have to say that. But yeah, quite an oily, fruity character, generally speaking, with this beer. So yeah, lovely aroma with this one, I have to say. I do like that. But I think it is about time that we have a taste of this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this is the Drinking Crayons 7.9% New England Hazy, whatever you want to call it, double IPA from Icarus Brewing Company in Lakewood, New Jersey. So let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Oh yeah, that is quite nice, I have to say. First impression is that it's actually quite kind of more wet and oily New England IPA, but it's still, as I say, very, very nice. I have to admit, if I was tasting this one blind, I would say that it's more one of these beers that fits into the American IPA category rather than the New England Hazy. And now, it does simply say on the can, Imperial India Pale Ale, which is, yeah, maybe something should have kind of picked up on, but on Untappd, this beer was listed as a New England hazy, if you like, or a hazy double IPA. So, yeah, but certainly it does have, you know, it's got some of the creaminess and smoothness of the New England IPA, but it has got a wee bit more of the kind of green component and the sweetness that you'd expect of a West Coast as well, which usually is what you put in usually what makes it more of an American IPA rather than West Coast or New England. But as I say, the main, you can talk about and debate style categories all day. The main focus should be, is it a good beer? This is, I have to say that, so thumbs up to Icarus for this one, and it's a nice introduction to the brewery, I have to say, and I might well have the opportunity to visit these guys. We'll just need to see how things go. But yeah, this is a lovely, lovely beer. So let's try and break this down for you and describe it a wee bit more in depth. So, middle third of your palate with this one. The backbone of the beer, you get this lovely, very fresh white bread crust to this one. It's almost a little bit like a hedgehog roll, to be honest with you. Now above that, there's a wee touch of a slightly crackery there, but nowhere near as much as I would have got from the from the aroma, I have to say. I get a little layer of a more I do get a layer of a slightly more kind of wholemeal brown bready character coming out of this one. And yeah, it's interesting for me because obviously a lot of the New England IPAs and IPAs generally speaking over here in Europe are brewed with German malts. You can certainly taste the difference with the American malt base. The bready character is completely different actually. It's not quite as fluffy, it feels a lot more kind of light and airy. And I know that this brewery, they have been collaborating with some local farms to do to do some malts and hops and stuff like that. So they are quite keen on supporting all their local things actually. So yeah, that's worth keeping in mind. But yeah, the bready character in this beer is lovely and light and airy and almost slightly crisp in a sense. So yeah, you have that wholemeal brown bready layer, you've got the fluffier white bready layer sitting above that, and then you start to get the wheat in this one just kind of densifying, just densifying that middle third of your palate. I don't find this beer to be madly oaty. It's actually remarkably light drinking, I have to say. It's quite easy to drink this one, which is dangerous when it's 7.9% ABV. But yeah, the wheaty character in this one, the wheat really is quite smoothing in this one. It's not a very bitey wheat character, but above the wheat, you start to get the oats out of this beer as well. So yeah, when you go down the middle line of your tongue, you start to get a little bit of a more kind of creamy, you get more of the kind of creaminess out of the oats. And as you move out toward the edges of the middle third of your palate, on that top layer, you get a wee bit more dryness out of the oaty character too. And yeah, the oats are a wee bit more creamy than I thought they were going to be from the aroma. The aroma gave me the impression that the oats were going to be a bit dry, actually. So that's worth, I think that is worth mentioning in this one. But if you go to the dead centre of your palate, you'll feel there's a little circle there where you get some nice sweetness out of the beer. It's like a Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. That is, of course, the flavour from the alcohol in the beer. And as you move out toward the edges of your palate from that, you've got a wee touch of a more kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity type quality coming out of the beer. So yeah, I really like how that goes together. Absolutely. The malty side of this beer is nice, and for me this is interesting because the bready character that you get out of this one is quite different. I mean, I'm quite familiar with, you know, the American two-row malts and stuff like this, but I'm guessing this beer, this brewery is using a maltery that I've never come across before, potentially. So yeah, interesting stuff, I have to say. But you know, knowing it's, you know, it's Sod's Law, I'll say this, and they'll be using something daft like Maris Otter or Weirman malts or something like this. So it might just be this beer, just the bready character in this beer just has a bit of a different vibe for me, but I like it. I like things that test your palate and make you think a little bit. But that's the middle third of the palate. Let's go to the back third of the palate then. So, back third of the palate is quite similar. That border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of a bready build up in there. You get some of the wholemeal kind of brown bready characters in there, and then the base of that back third of your palate, you've got a little bit more of a kind of, you do have a little bit more of a kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there, bit of graininess, you know, a little bit more of a kind of graininess too. But it's, you know, as I always say, the back third of your palate tends to be a little bit drier and more bitter. Sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate. So the bread crust is a bit drier. You've got a wee touch of that more crackery character coming out of it. You've got the brown bready layer, which feels a little bit taller and even more light and airy. Then you've got the white bready note sitting above that, and again that layer is taller and more airy, and you can feel some of the wheat just creeping over the top of that there into the back third of your palate, which is very nice. So yeah, above all of that, you start to get some of the yeasty qualities out of the beer. And for me, again, as I quite often get, the yeasty character in this beer, it gives you this sort of light farmhousey, white bready character, which I certainly do enjoy. So yeah, light farmhousey bready character for me. There's a little bit of woodiness in there. There's a little bit of cracker, a little bit of dryness too. So yeah, I do like that about this one. The yeasty character comes out a wee bit more the further into the aftertaste for this beer. You do also get some of the woodiness coming out of this beer too. As I say, toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you can feel some woodiness in there. But yeah, back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller, and as you come further forward into the middle third of the palate, it condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But yeah, good stuff, I have to say. I like the malty side of this beer. It's really nice. A lot of people forget that about IPAs, is that you have to have a good malt base in there to go together with your hops. So yeah, on that note, let's go on to the hoppy side of the beer then. Back corners of the palate, you get a little bit of earthiness there. Again, that usually out of the hops in this beer, I would pick Mosaic as being the culprit for that one. But as you move further forward, you can feel there's a little touch of herbal character, and as you push toward the front corners of your palate, you get a wee bit more of a kind of floral aromaticity, and there is a wee bit of that spiciness there, which I think is down to the Columbus. But round the front curve of the tongue, absolutely, it's lighter and more grassy. It's got quite a wet grassiness to it, I would say, to be quite honest with you. So yeah, that's quite interesting for me. I think that covers the green component in this one, but this is not the most bitter of beers, definitely not, but we'll come back to that when we talk about the mouthfeel. Let's focus on the front third of the palate and the let's focus on the front third of the palate and the more kind of fruity side of the beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you do get a little bit of a kind of bready build up in there. So soft white bread and also a little bit of a kind of brown bready character. The base of that front third of your palate, you get a little bit of the bread crust and a wee bit of the brown bread, and the brown bread actually is quite sweet there. But then above that, you get the nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's have a wee look at that. So yeah, the juicy fruity esters in this beer are quite interesting. I do get more and more orange out of this beer the more that I drink of it. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer, generally speaking, is quite oily. So yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, there's definitely a wee touch of a stronger, more punchy passion fruit in this one. But then as you move further forward, you get, it's a mix of juicy and more oily and slightly drier as well. You get a little bit of mango character out of this one. But as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, there's a bit of apricot in there, a lovely little bit of dryness. Yeah, a lovely little bit of apricot, a little bit of dryness in there. And then yeah, in the middle of that front third of your palate too, there's quite a nice oily pineapple coming out of this one. And that's going to be down to the Eldorado and the Azaka, I would say. The passion fruit in this one, ooh, that probably some of that will come from the Eldorado. Some of it will also, the mango will also come from the Eldorado as well. I feel I'm forgetting one of the hops that's in this one. Nah, it doesn't seem I am. No, yeah, Eldorado. It'll be the one giving you the more kind of soft tropical fruits. But yeah, when you move into the front half of the front third of your palate in this beer, it becomes a lot more about the orangey side of things. Like you can feel the base of that front half of the front third of your tongue, the front sixth of your tongue, if you want to call it that. That's the big oily orangey character of the Amarillo. For me, Amarillo's always been a bit more oily in its fruity characteristics and a bit more zesty, so you can absolutely feel that in this beer. But above that, you start to get a more tangerine-y, mandarin-y type orange that just feels a little bit lighter, actually. And that's, you know, that's the Mosaic and the Azaka that's going to give you that, actually. So, yeah, I get a lot of the Eldorado, I get a lot of the Amarillo. The other two hops for me, the Azaka, the Azaka and the Mosaic Lupulin take a bit of a back seat for me. The Columbus as well. I'm surprised that you don't get so much in the way of floral spiciness out of this beer. It is detectable, but not overly much. So I suspect the potential of the Columbus has been used as an early addition hop just to give you that little bit of bitterness that the beer has. But yeah, definitely it has got some tropical fruit character, but this is mainly a more orangey, zesty, citrusy leaning IPA for me. But nothing wrong with that. I do like that about this one. So yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour of this beer. So yeah, like I said, generally speaking, I would say this beer is a bit more of an oily take on the New England Hazy IPA, but you could also classify this one as simply American IPA, which I wonder if this was the reason behind them just calling it Imperial India Pale Ale on the can. Correct me, share your thoughts with me on that in the video description below, in the comment section below. Brain isn't working, but like I said, for me, generally speaking, this is quite an oily and wet IPA. You get more and more oily character out of it the more that you drink of it. It's got a little bit of silkiness to it as well, which I quite enjoy. In terms of the overall mouthfeel, what would we say with this one? Maybe top end of mid-bodied. Yeah, top end of mid-bodied for me. Carbonation is very, very smooth. You can feel the water in this beer is quite clean, but it doesn't feel quite as clean as the water we have here in Scandinavia or back home in Scotland. It has a little bit more of a kind of minerally kind of thickness to it, I would say. I love thinking about the water quality that goes into beers. Water definitely does affect the taste in my mind. In terms of IBUs with this beer, I think this is a fairly standard 30 IBU. It could be pushing 40, which isn't uncommon when you go up to the double IPA side of things, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's 40 IBUs, but I would say about 30. The malt base has a little bit of dryness to it, good little bit of smoothness, quite a wee bit of sweetness, and I get more and more sweetness out of this beer the further into the aftertaste that I go. And then, yeah, you've got that lovely fruity character to this one, a little bit more of a kind of lighter tropical note to it, but also a big oily orangey character too. But certainly a lovely beer, this one, and it certainly makes me curious to try a few more of the offerings from Icarus Brewing, which is, that gives you, it means you've had a good impression of the brewery. I think I maybe need to go and visit these guys at some point because they are pretty highly rated. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This was the Drinking Crayons, a 7.9% American, I would say, yeah, American double IPA from Icarus Brewing in Lakewood, New Jersey, just outside of Toms River. So yeah, definitely worth trying more from this brewery, I have to say that. This is maybe the only time I'll get to try one of their beers until I actually go over there But yeah, certainly look forward to that. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Icarus Brewing as well. Make sure you check out my friend Matt over at Massive Beer Reviews. He's probably reviewed a good number of these. I'll need to check that actually, but he's from very, well, not very close, but fairly close to this brewery, of course. So he's probably reviewed a lot more than I have or ever will. But yeah, I look forward to trying more of this brewery's beers and more New Jersey breweries in the near future. So let me know some New Jersey breweries that I should check out in the comment section below. But check out my social media, check out Icarus Brewing social media, check out my friend Matt at Massive Beer Reviews, and I'll catch you guys in the next one soon. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.